Have you ever felt like you weren't alone in your own home? That unsettling feeling of being watched, even when every door is locked and every window is shut? For one family in Denver, Colorado, that feeling wasn't just in their heads. It was real, and it was living in their attic. Our story begins on a cold November night in 2018. The Johnson family had just moved into a beautiful, historic house in a quiet Denver suburb. It was their dream home, with sprawling rooms, a big backyard, and a quaint, dusty attic. At first, everything was perfect. But soon, things started to feel off. It began with small things. A faint scratching sound from above, late at night. The feeling of a cold spot in an otherwise warm room. The children, young twins named Leo and Mia, started having nightmares. They'd wake up screaming about shadow men dancing on the ceiling. Their parents, Sarah and Tom, initially dismissed it as the stress of the move, the anxieties of a new environment. Kids have active imaginations, right? That's what they told themselves. But the feeling of unease was persistent, a low hum of anxiety that settled over the house like a thick fog. One evening, Sarah was putting the kids to bed when Mia pointed a trembling finger at the corner of her room. "The shadow man is watching," she whispered, her eyes wide with genuine fear. Sarah saw nothing but the familiar play of light and dark. Yet the chill that ran down her spine was undeniable. Later that night, Tom was working in his home office when he heard a distinct thud from the attic directly above him. He called out, thinking maybe it was a raccoon that had gotten in. Silence. He tried to ignore it. But, a few minutes later, another thud. This time louder, more deliberate. It sounded almost like a footstep. The nightly disturbances grew more frequent, the scratching became rhythmic, the cold spots grew larger, and the feeling of being watched intensified. The final straw came one night when Sarah was home alone. She was in the living room when she heard a soft, melodic humming coming from upstairs. It sounded like a lullaby, but warped and distorted, like an old record playing at the wrong speed. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The humming was coming directly from the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling. That's when the Johnsons decided they needed proof. They couldn't live in fear and uncertainty any longer. They had to know what was happening in their house. Tom, being a tech enthusiast, ordered a set of high-end motion-activated night vision cameras. He set them up strategically throughout the house. One in the kids' bedroom, one in the main hallway, and, most importantly, one pointing directly at the attic door. He also placed a camera inside the attic itself, hoping to catch whatever was making the noises. The first few nights, the cameras captured nothing out of the ordinary. The usual creaks and groans of an old house settling. Sarah and Tom started to feel a little foolish. Maybe the kids' imaginations had just gotten the better of them. Maybe they were just being paranoid. Then came the night of November 21st. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet, and Tom was reviewing the previous night's footage. He was about to give up when he saw it. On the hallway camera, at precisely 11:33 p.m., a shadow detached itself from the corner of the ceiling. It wasn't a normal shadow cast by a light source. It was darker, denser, and it moved with an unsettling fluidity, independent of any object. It slithered across the ceiling and hovered over the children's bedroom door for a moment before melting back into the darkness. Tom's blood ran cold. He showed the footage to Sarah, and her face went pale. It was real. The shadow men weren't a figment of their children's imagination. They spent the next few days glued to the live feeds, their anxiety mounting with every passing hour. What they witnessed was more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. The shadows weren't just moving. They were intelligent. They began to mimic the family's movements. When Tom walked down the hallway, a shadowy form would glide along the ceiling above him, perfectly mirroring his pace. When Sarah did yoga in the living room, a contorted, inky shape would twist and stretch on the wall behind her. It was a grotesque, silent mockery of their lives. The most disturbing part was the camera inside the attic. It would show the shadows coalescing, forming distinct humanoid shapes that would pace back and forth, their forms flickering and distorting in the infrared light. They would gather around the attic door, as if waiting, listening. The family was living in a state of constant terror. They couldn't sleep, they could barely eat. They felt like prisoners in their own home, haunted by these silent, mimicking entities. They called paranormal investigators, but the teams found nothing, no EMF spikes, no EVPs, nothing tangible. The shadows seemed to exist just outside the realm of what could be measured. Desperate and terrified, the Johnsons knew they had to confront whatever was in their attic. They couldn't let these things torment their family any longer. With a heavy sense of dread, they decided they would open the attic door together, in the daylight, armed with flashlights and a resolve born of fear. The day came. The sun streamed through the windows, a stark contrast to the darkness that had consumed their nights. Tom grabbed a heavy maglite, Sarah held a cross, and they stood beneath the attic hatch. The house was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Taking a deep breath, Tom pulled the cord. The ladder unfolded with a series of loud clicks that echoed through the quiet house. He aimed the flashlight beam into the dark opening. They expected to see the flickering, dancing shadows they had watched on the camera feeds. They expected a confrontation with the entities that had been plaguing them. But there was nothing. The attic was completely still and empty. The dust lay undisturbed. Old boxes and forgotten furniture sat exactly where they had been left. The camera they had placed inside was still there, but there were no shadows, not a single one. Relief washed over them, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. Where did they go? Had they imagined it all? Was the camera footage some kind of bizarre technical glitch? Tom cautiously climbed the ladder, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusty air. He scanned every corner, every nook and cranny. Nothing. It was just a normal, creepy old attic. Then Sarah gasped from the bottom of the ladder. Tom, look, she whispered, her voice trembling. She was pointing not at the attic, but at the hallway wall. The wall where the family photos hung. Tom climbed down, his eyes following her trembling finger. He stared at the photos, and a cold, horrifying realization dawned on him. The photos had changed. In a picture from their last family vacation, a tall, slender shadow figure stood just behind Leo, its form almost blending into the trees. In Mia's first-grade school picture, a dark, smudged shape lurked in the corner of the frame where there had been nothing before, and in their wedding photo, hanging prominently in the center of the wall, two distinct, shadowy figures stood behind them at the altar. Their dark forms a stark contrast to the white of Sarah's dress. They frantically checked all the photos in the house, their horror growing with each one they looked at. The shadows were there, in every single picture. They had been there all along, hiding in plain sight, attached to their family, a part of their history they never knew existed. The figures in the attic weren't strangers. They were a part of them. They were the secrets, the forgotten sorrows, the unspoken pains of generations past, given form. The house wasn't haunted. They were. The shadows hadn't vanished. They had simply returned to where they always belonged, hidden within the memories of their family. They realized the shadows weren't just mimicking them. They were reminding them. Reminding them that some family secrets never truly die. They just wait in the dark, for the right moment to step back into the light. The Johnsons sold the house a week later, but they knew moving wouldn't solve the problem. The shadows were in their photos, in their memories, a permanent part of their family portrait. They had learned a terrifying lesson in that Denver attic. You can try to run from your past, but you can never escape your own shadow. What do you think these shadows were? Have you ever experienced something that made you question the pictures on your own walls? Let me know your theories and stories in the comments below. And if you enjoy tales that explore the darkness that lurks just beneath the surface, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more unsettling stories. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.